Hey kids, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. Thank you for joining me. Glad you could join me. The drink of choice tonight, by the way, is a generic brand plain seltzer because my local grocery store for the last 2 weeks has been out of the good stuff. Completely picked clean, empty shelf. No lemon lime Canada dry seltzer. So I'm forced to choke down this generic swill that is actually pretty good. It turns out it's kind of hard to fuck up seltzer water. Anyway, welcome once again. Glad to see everybody in the live chat. Glad to see everybody here. As always, if you are joining us live and you have a question for me in the live chat, please hold on to it, and I will get to the live chat in a little bit. But first, I'm going to answer questions from my Patreon patrons. So let's jump right in with that, shall we? And the first question from a patron is from our pal Some Random Geek, who says, thank you to Hans for singing that lovely song for my birthday, and thank you, Steve, for shouting out the TLDEF charity stream I was part of between the 10th and the 12th at the last Ask Away. The Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, TLDEF, was founded in 2003 and is a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to end discrimination and achieve equality for transgender people. To learn more and to donate, go to transgenderlegal.org. Tavi and the rest of the Twitch streamers, myself, Doot Snaps, Groundhog 201, Lucky Bun, Lin Wu, Nas, the Nico, Sarah Britt, and Dances with Awoos were able to raise $1,719.97 for TLDEF, beating our goal of $1,000 for the weekend. That is amazing. Congratulations and good for you. Now a quick question. What were your issues with the Chaz/Chop? There is constructive criticism to be had about it, and leftists have some of their own. I'm curious about your thoughts and views on the Seattle Commune. I don't have a problem with I don't have a problem with it in the sense that I think they shouldn't have done it. I'm sympathetic to their reasons for doing it, and I wish it had been more of a success. My problem is, and I think when I mentioned it last time, or when I mentioned it when I talked about it in the Facepalm 5, when I said it was doomed, it was doomed to failure. And the reason I say that isn't because I think that there's something like inherently wrong with it, or that they shouldn't have attempted it. But when you try to do something like that in the context of a system that doesn't want you to succeed, and I think it was pretty clear that the city of Seattle did not want that zone, that autonomous zone, to succeed. They gave them no help. They basically just pulled back and said, "Well, we're just gonna wait for you to fail," and without support and without help from the outside, and facing issues inside the zone that they weren't equipped to handle, like crime and drug abuse and how to keep order while also respecting people's rights and all that stuff. Like they just it collapsed. It inevitably collapsed because they were trying to create something in an environment that makes it very difficult for something like that to survive. So that was my only problem with it. Not that I felt like they were wrong to try, or that their motives weren't admirable, because I think they were. I just, as I said in that video, I thought it was doomed to fail from the start because of just the nature of it and the nature of the world in which they tried to create it. But I appreciate what they tried to do. And like I said, it would have, maybe if they had had a little bit more support, or maybe if there had been, I don't know. It's easy to say, like, well, if they had done it a little differently, maybe it would have been more successful. But that's basically what I'm saying. Next question is from Zach Cody. Hey, Steve, First time asking on here, so I hope I'm posting in the right place. You are posting in the right place, Zach. Congratulations. I have a question inspired by the Lower Decks trailer. Some people online were commenting that there are way too many tables in the schematic shown for the USS Cerritos. But I think that it would make sense for a ship designed for second contact to have a shitload of places to share a meal on board. What sort of things do you think would be helpful for second contact? And what are your larger thoughts on second contact as a mission? Well, I mean, are people really complaining that that the schematic looks like there are too many tables on the ship? That might be peak Star Trek nerd nitpicking, if that is true. If people have actually been saying, I looked at the schematics and there's too many tables on the ship. What? Okay. I mean, I thought it was bad when people were complaining about how the ships in the J.J. Abrams movies were too big. I thought that to me was like peak pointless Star Trek nerd nitpicking. The imaginary ships are way too big. Has nothing nothing. It affects none of the stories. Has nothing to do with anything that happens in any of the movies. But they noticed if you do the scale and you work out how big the ship is, the ship is way too big. So they should have made the imaginary spaceship a more reasonable size. But I think that actually beats that. Too many tables on the ship. Well then how could I possibly enjoy the show now? And now that I know, it completely breaks the show for me. Now that I know there is a completely unreasonable number of tables on this ship. It does make, yes. If the goal of the mission, or if the mission of the ship, rather, I should say, is second contact, which they've made a joke of in talking about it in the Comic-Con panel yesterday. They talked about how, it's our mission is second contact, which is where you do the follow-up to first contact and you get all the paperwork signed and all that. Yeah, if that's the mission of the ship, it makes sense that you would have places for people to meet and to get to know each other and conduct business. It makes sense. What other things do I think would be helpful for second contact? Places to relax, places to hang out and get to know each other. Maybe a place where representatives of the culture that is being second contacted could do research on the history of the Federation and the history, like a library area on the ship where they could learn about the people that they've just made contact with, something like that. And I actually think the second contact thing makes me more interested in seeing the show now. I'm still not super duper excited about Lower Decks. I very much have a wait and see attitude about it. I'm not thinking oh Jesus, this is going to be so great. But I'm not thinking that it looks terrible either. I'm just thinking, okay, this could go either way. But knowing that the mission of the ship is second contact, and assuming that they carry that through and that becomes an enduring part of the premise of the show. It's not just a one-off joke for the first episode. That's kind of clever. I like that. I like that idea of, once, the hero ship, once the Enterprise does first contact and then they all leave, now we come in a few weeks later and we do the follow-up. That. To me, that's a funny idea. So I like that idea if that is the primary mission of the ship is to do follow-up work and conduct second contact procedures. That's kind of funny. That's cute. I like that. So it makes me more interested in the show, which is a good thing. That's what you should be doing when you're trying to get people to watch a show before it starts. You want to get them interested in the show, and that has got me more interested in the show. Next question from Trisha Brady. Hi, Steve. Hope you're keeping well. Apologies if you've answered this before, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on swearing in Star Trek. I know some fans freaked out about the F-bomb drop in Picard and the use of language in Discovery. Personally, I don't get it. Maybe it's because I'm Irish and we are generally not precious when it comes to this type of language, but for me, characters speaking like adults and using expletives when frustrated makes a show more believable. To me, Miles shouting out Ballots when he got frustrated and upset in Time's Orphan, Laris calling people cheeky feckers, and Admiral Clancy using the F word when she gets frustrated with Picard is no different than Riker constantly exclaiming, "What the hell?" I agree with you. I am not bothered by it remotely. I don't have the tiniest little problem with it. I can maybe see the complaints of people who are parents of young children, and they're not comfortable letting their young children hear that kind of language on TV yet, so they feel like they can't watch Star Trek, or they can't watch the new Star Trek with their kids. I'm sort of sympathetic to that, but then I think, well, then lucky you, there's like a whole 50 years of Star Trek built up that you can watch with your kids. You know, while you're waiting for them to grow up to a point where you're comfortable letting them watch a show where somebody says the F word once every 10 episodes, you know. So I mean, like, that's the most sympathetic I am to it. But for me personally, I have no problem with it whatsoever. I don't think that Star Trek must remain like a PG or PG-13 thing forever. In all instances of it, I think it's perfectly fine to have Star Trek shows that are a little bit more adult. And it seems like that is the direction that the franchise is going in the future under the current production regime, where the live action stuff will be geared a little bit more toward adults, and they'll be doing animated stuff that's a little bit more acceptable to kids. And also they're doing like a Nickelodeon animated show, which will be explicitly targeted at kids. So it's not like there's going to be no Star Trek for kids in the current generation of shows. It's just that the live action stuff seems geared specifically more toward adults, as opposed to being like, you know, super safe and family friendly. And like I said, I have no problem with that whatsoever. Patrick Simpson, hey Steve, how can I stop myself from ending up in jail for murder? The UK is following suit against America. There has been a protest against mask wearing in London, a protest which had people of all ages standing shoulder to shoulder, breathing, speaking, and shouting their stupidity against a mandatory mask wearing rule coming into being. How is it in this day and age we have such unadulterated stupidity? England was forced to put one of its cities back into lockdown not long ago, yet these idiots continue to spout BS and undiluted dumb fuckery. Many of the same will not believe the simple facts science gives us for evolution and global warming, but then are happy to turn around and enthusiastically spread the message that science supposedly states masks don't help. The sheer arrogance and ego is infuriating. So I guess what I really want to ask you is, how do we make these people understand we are trying to help them stay alive, and in turn help each other? How did we become so selfish that people think it's okay to let elderly and at-risk people die as long as we're okay, even though this is a fallacy and a perfectly healthy 15-year-old neighbor of mine's just died from this virus? I'm one of those at risk. Is it really too much to ask to wear a piece of cloth over your lower face while shopping? Though the idea of complete freedom to live how you wish is not as pervasive in the UK as it is in America, even though that actually has sane and understandable limits, which people often ignore while standing on their soapbox, it seems to be spreading like wildfire and is not helping in any way whatsoever. Sorry, this turned into a bit of a rant. Trick Simpson. Well, by the way, you go by Trick? That's really cool. I don't know. You know, it's like my buddy Eli Bosnick wrote a piece a couple years ago where he said I don't think he wrote it. He tweeted it, and it was a common thought. You know, I think there was one particular piece that originated it, and I can't remember who wrote it, but I first saw Eli tweet it, and a couple other people sort of picked it up. And it's the idea of, I don't know how to explain to you that you're supposed to care about other people. You know, like, how do you argue someone into accepting that what happens to other people matters, and that it is our responsibility to take care of other people and to look out for each other? Like, how do you explain that to someone who just does not get it? And I don't know. I don't have the answer. Like, I wish I did. I wish I knew what to say. I wish I knew, well, here's what you do to, you know, to convince the people to wear the mask. But like, I don't know. I think that maybe that message has not been as well conveyed by the media or the culture as it should be. I think whenever anybody tries to turn the focus to any particular individual, the response to that should always be an attempt to turn them back toward the greater good. I've been knee deep in this for a couple weeks as far as the issue of opening schools. I did a video this week about why it's just absolutely ridiculous to suggest reopening schools in the United States given the state of the pandemic. And one of the really popular arguments that people make for saying it's okay to reopen schools is, well, kids don't get sick from it. Kids don't die from it. Which isn't true. Some kids do get sick from it, and some kids can develop very serious life-threatening complications. Some young kids have actually died as a result of contracting COVID-19. But even if that were not true, even if kids were, not threatened by it themselves, they still spread it to other people. It still represents a threat to their teachers, to their families, and then, out beyond that to other people that their families come into contact with. Often, it seems like kids are more likely to be asymptomatic carriers than adults. Some of the research I've seen on that is conflicting. I saw a study that suggests that's not the case. I saw a couple other studies that suggest that kids by maybe a few percentage points are more likely to be asymptomatic carriers. But the point is, if you're an asymptomatic carrier, if you have it and you don't even have symptoms, you don't even have any reason to think you have it, and then you go out among people and just act like everything's normal, you can spread it to other people who can then get really, really sick and have serious complications and even die. So anytime anybody says, well, I don't see why I should have to do X, Y, or Z because most people survive it, or if you're worried about the kids, well, the kids are going to be okay. That's not the point. The point is it's a contagious disease. It can, if it doesn't threaten you personally or people you care about, that's great, but it can still threaten other people through them, whether they know it or not. So I feel like we need to constantly turn the argument back away from individual to society. I don't know if that will be effective. I think a lot of people just have completely turned their ears off and are just not interested in listening and do not want to accept the reality of it. But that's the best I can tell you, is try to keep turning the argument back to, it's not about you. It's not about any particular individual. It's about everybody who is at risk. Nick Mainpaw, I love your take on the holodeck holosuite. How is it you think they get away with such wide open and expansive space? Does the floor move? How do they not walk into walls? This was actually addressed in a novel, one of the few Star Trek novels that I have actually read, and I read it a long time ago. I read it back in the 90s when it was first published. It's called Reunion, and it's a novel, one of the pocket books, Simon and Schuster, like TNG novels, and it's about crewmates from Captain Picard's tour on the Stargazer coming back onto the Enterprise for an event, for some kind of like special ceremony. I think one of them is being crowned like king or crowned like monarch of their home world or something. Because Picard ran with a pretty highfalutin crowd on the Stargazer apparently. And there's a scene in that book, I think it's Reunion. There's a scene in that book where Worf is giving them a tour and he's explaining how the holodeck works. And none of this has ever been made explicit in canon, but it's sort of pseudo canon, and it's the best attempt I have heard from an official Star Trek story, even if it's not officially canon, to explain how the holodeck works. And it's basically the holodeck uses force fields to create a treadmill effect. So yeah, the holodeck room never gets any bigger, and it looks bigger because of images projected on the walls, and it feels bigger, and you never run into the wall because as you move throughout the holodeck, your movements are limited or guided by force fields that keep you from running into the wall, and you're never even aware of it. Like, it creates like a treadmill effect, so you're sort of walking or running in place. But you feel like you're moving because your environment is moving around you. But you never run into the wall, So, and I think that's consistent with what we see in the shows. And I feel like that's probably the best explanation we're ever going to get of how the holodeck is able to simulate vast open spaces in a closed room, because they use force fields to keep you from bouncing into the wall, and you never quite, you never notice it. You're not aware of it. Next question is from Eric Allen. All right, Steve. So we know Kanye is an idiot and we shouldn't be giving him so much coverage. I'm not saying he should shut up and rap, like some people saying LeBron should shut up and dribble, but we should all recognize the foolishness of nearly everything he says and just disregard it. Stop giving him attention. With that being said, if you were to vote for a musician for president and vice president, who would it be? I'd pick Janelle Monáe for president and Henry Rollins for vice president. That, to me, is a power ticket. Anyway, as always, I hope you're doing well, and thank you for all the wonderful content you provide. It's genuinely one of the highlights of my week. Gosh, that may sound like I have an incredibly boring life, but for real, thank you. Well, thank you very much for saying that. And, oh boy, I was thinking about this earlier. I was thinking, who would I want on a presidential ticket if I only had musicians to pick from? And I think I would go Tombstone the Dead Man for president and Bruce Springsteen for vice president. I think that's a fair ticket. And if you've never heard of if you've never heard of Tombstone the Dead Man, do yourself a favor and look him up and listen to his shit because he's fucking awesome. But Tombstone would be my number one pick because I'm not only do I listen to his music, but I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he's just like, I don't think he's smart enough that I don't think he would want the job. Like, if I went to him and said, "Hey, would you want to be president?" I think he would be smart enough to go, "No, that's all right. I'm fine. I'm cool." But I mean, I'm thinking of musicians that I know and that I know of. I think I would love to. I would definitely vote for Dead Man if he if he ran. And Springsteen, obviously. I mean, Springsteen would be like the Joe Biden. Springsteen would be like the sort of the older guy who's been around for a while and knows everybody and would be the guy to make friends and kind of push things through behind the scenes. Is still young enough that he could run for president himself after Tombstone the Dead Man's 2 terms are over. So, that I feel like this is a great idea. But yeah, that's who I would go for. Question from Eric Byer. Given our limited perspective from this stage of the pandemic, do you think we will be able to stream Star Trek Picard Season 2 before or after we have a readily available, safe, and effective vaccine against COVID-19? Maybe ask Millicent if the Huskies already made one. I think we're getting a vaccine way before we're getting Picard Season 2. Maybe, I hope even if Dr. Fauci's speculation or prediction that we would have a vaccine by the end of the year turns out to be too optimistic, and it's well into next year before we have a vaccine. Like, I don't think we're getting season 2 of Picard until probably at least 2022. Like, that would be my guess. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure out how to work things around COVID. Maybe the COVID thing will go away, by the end of the year, and things will be able to get back to work, and maybe we'll have a season 2 of Picard by the end of next year. But I don't know. I would bet we'd be waiting until at least 2022 for a new season of Picard. So hopefully we won't be waiting that long for a vaccine. And as for the Huskies already making one, I asked Millicent about it, and she said, yes, of course, there is a vaccine for Huskies. So, I assume there are benevolent Husky scientists working on one that would protect humans. But who knows how long that will be? They'll probably have it done before we have ours done, though. Michael Hanneline, I feel sick and I don't even have COVID. Sorry to be a downer, but how the fuck do we keep going through all this shit, man? In 2017, I thought it couldn't get any worse. Then 2018 happened. Then 2019 happened. Each year was worse than the previous, and yet I'm pretty sure all 3 years combined were better than the first 6.5 months of 2020. Just for perspective, I lost 7 family members in those 3 years, including my dad, who died of a combination of AIDS and lymphoma. 2020 is still worse. Hey, remember when the whole fucking continent of Australia was on fire because global warming is a real thing and politicians continued to be criminally negligent about it and even mocked people desperate for help while millions of animals, many endangered, died and countless homes burned down and the smoke blotted out the sun? Remember how that was this year? I somehow honestly forget sometimes, considering the unstopping barrage of catastrophes that seem to have come since then. I'd list them all, but I think we all know, and you'd like to answer other questions today, so I'll just move on. How do we keep going? How do we not drown in despair? I used to try and read about all the major events in the news, read the latest published research on COVID-19, donate money to help, but now it seems like just getting out of bed is a monumental task. And also, I'm broke, so I can't even donate money to help anymore. Every time I look at the news, it somehow gets worse. I guess we've got federal police just abducting people on the street in unmarked vans without cause now. Oh, an assassin disguised as a UPS just killed the family of a judge appointed to the Epstein case. Oh, 150,000 U.S. residents are dead of COVID-19, and Trump is ordering that the CDC just doesn't get the data anymore. That was just in this past week, and that's not even all of it. What the actual fuck? I used to use video games as my primary escape when I get overwhelmed like this, but I can't even enjoy those without feeling guilty now because every major video game publisher is being run by fucking supervillains at this point. Ubisoft has been doing more rape cover-ups in its ranks than the Catholic Church, apparently. Kind of dampens my enthusiasm. I try to work on my own writing, but I can't focus. I have trouble even focusing enough to read any of the stack of novels I've been meaning to get to. How do we maintain our sanity? How can we not lose hope? So I'll tell you something that I told someone yesterday, and it's the best I can do. You know, it's the best response to this question that I have been able to come up with. I was chatting in like direct message with someone who is one of the most precious people in the world to me. And when I say that, I mean, she's like top two, like top two most important, precious people to me in my life. And we've known each other for over 20 years. And she expressed similar sentiments. You know, she's been having a rough time just because for things in general, and also things, you know, like that are specific to her life and her career, and just was having, you know, a moment of just like, oh fuck, you know, like just feeling shitty about everything, hating the world. And I said to her, all I can do is promise that I will hang in there as long as you do. And that's all I can say to you. You know, and I don't know if that's worth anything, but I'll hang in there as long as you do. I just noticed in the live chat, yes, 255 AD, one of them is my wife, smartass. I'll hang in there as long as you do. If you don't quit, I won't quit, you know? And as far as what that means specifically, I don't know. That's something that you need to figure out for yourself. But if you keep going, if you hang in there, if you don't give up, if you find a reason to keep trying to not only live your life and get through this, but to help in the little tiny ways that you can, whatever those ways may be, even if you can't afford to donate, you can't afford to volunteer, whatever, you know, whatever way you figure out to get through it, as long as you keep figuring out ways to get through it, I will keep figuring out ways to get through it too. And I know a lot of other people will as well. And that's all I can really say to you. That's all. I mean, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to tell you other than we're in this together. And believe me, you're not alone. I see it the same as you do, you know, like, and I feel it. There are times I try not to put this across in the videos very often. But there are times when I feel hopeless, when I see things that are happening in the world and I think, Jesus Christ, what are we supposed to do about this? How is this ever going to get any better? There are many times when I feel absolutely helpless, especially when I see people that I love, friends of mine, suffering or feeling anxious or going through the same sort of thing. I think, God, I wish there was something I could do. I wish I could do something. I wish I could help. I wish I could make it better. And I can't. Like, I can't. And I feel helpless. So I know how you feel. And a lot of people know how you feel. You know, we're in this together. We're all having to hang in there together. And that's the only advice I can give you and the only solace I can offer you. And I know it doesn't really fix anything, but hopefully it helps to know that you're not by yourself. You know, you're not by yourself. Yeah. So anyway, next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. So I finished How Nonviolence Protects the State. At the very end of that book, Peter Gelderloos suggests that if the left are going to use violence, we need to create a sort of honor culture wherein we have respect for our enemies, i.e. cops and other agents of the state, and view it as shameful to harm them in anything other than clear combat situations. Gelderloos believes that kind of thing could prevent left-wing violence from escalating to stuff like massacres or purges. To be honest, being a dork and all, what he was describing kind of made me think of something like a more progressive version of Klingon honor culture, which is probably why this came to mind when I was thinking about what to ask you. Do you believe honor codes like that can work in real life? I mean, like, suppose some country has a super corrupt police force. There's an uprising in this country, and during it, a left-wing militia takes over a particularly bad police station. Do you buy that something like a compassionate honor code could prevent the militia members from just opting to kill all the cops they've just taken prisoner? I'm not against violence, but the idea that it could be constrained that way struck me as a little idealistic. You know, I don't know. I mean, maybe an honor code would help, but you know, most people agree that it's wrong to murder people already. Like, and maybe making it an honor code and adding some ritual to it and making it like a specific point of pride for people might help. But, like, we know it's wrong to kill people already. You know, especially if it's a person who is completely at your mercy, who is a prisoner, who you have not afforded any kind of due process. I mean, we know already that it's wrong to do that. So if you know it's wrong to do that, but you do it anyway because you're really pissed off at the person, or because you hate what they represent, or because you think that they deserve it, or whatever. Like, if you're willing to cross the line and say, I know it's wrong to kill somebody under these circumstances, but I'm going to do it anyway, I don't know if an honor code is really going to stop you. But maybe I'm wrong. Like, it seems to me like essential morality is there. And if that's not enough, if you have decided that that's not enough of a reason to not kill this person, or to especially to not kill this group of people that you have subdued, I don't know if an honor code is going to do it. You know, I think you say at the end of your question, it struck me as a bit idealistic. Yeah, it strikes me as a bit idealistic too. Maybe not idealistic, but just, I feel like, I don't think it would make much of a difference. Like, when you're talking about people who have decided, okay, you know, like, for instance, like, we took over the police station, we captured all the corrupt cops. If you're the type of person that says, and now let's kill them, I don't know if having an honor code is really going to fix that, is really going to prevent that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Isaiah Taylor is up next. As you know, Steve, I'm a very forward and truthful person. I try my best not to hide my feelings from those that are willing to listen, so here it is. I suffer from self-internalized racism and misanthropy. I sometimes don't feel at home with even my own people, probably due in part to me being viewed as, quote, acting white. Or maybe it's just my autism giving me a different outlook on life that was not marred in stereotypical cultural accusations of what African-American manhood is supposed to be. It started after my mom died and when my dad was more in my life. I was verbally and at times physically abused by him, but the carnage was worse from my older brother. He would make fun of me for being into space and science. I remember he would cut me with knives, hit me with video game CD cases, and threaten me with harm if I didn't act cool. And even forced me to get phone numbers of people, or in his case, friends to him from middle school to participate for my 15th birthday. I don't really remember. He even wanted me to commit sexual assault by telling me I should grab a woman's ass to, I don't know, figure out what sex and puberty was. I don't know. My dad would, on occasion, join in on the fun by degrading me in front of my brother when I would be in bed. Looking back, I have bouts of racism whenever I would hear a rap song with too many N-words and other things. I've always believed that I was, quote, too white for my black friends and, quote, not black enough for my white friends who wanted to be black. This followed me throughout grade school as I had zero friends my age, but I had a lot of female white teachers that came to my aid. I don't really have a lot of friends, but I've accepted that. Sometimes life is just hard. I think I began to distrust people when I asked a former classmate of mine, can we do something for spring break? And she snubbed me. I wasn't hateful about it, and maybe things happened, but I did save around $150 to go. Please bear in mind that I'm not a hateful person, but I have a lot of history that I need to reckon with and just take it day by day. I walk a thin line, I guess. I was Zooming with Vovacat17, and he said that the fact that humanity is still working on itself as opposed to destroying ourselves, and that gives me hope. I feel like if I can't be accepted by any group, so I'll just be me. I can't be a hermit kingdom like North Korea or former communist Albania. I got to be me. More of a rant than a question. Anyway, Black Lives Matter. Well, we can all echo that sentiment. Black Lives Matter. I mean, I don't, all I can say is thanks. Thank you for sharing, and I'm glad that you felt comfortable sharing it. And I can't even tell you how sorry I am that you had to go through that. The kind of abuse you described is awful. And having gotten to know you a little bit, and having spoken with you in our Patreon hangouts, and reading your questions and stuff since you became a patron, and getting to know that you're obviously a good guy. And it really, really pains me to know that happened to you, that you went through that. I mean, it would pain me if that happened to anybody, but especially someone that I've started to know a little bit. And, so I'm incredibly sorry about that. And, but I mean, I appreciate that you're sharing. I appreciate that, you and Vovacat have been Zooming and have made friends. I think that's really cool. And you, as far as, not feeling accepted by any group. I mean, I can't relate to that to the extent that you can. But I can relate maybe a little bit to feeling like you're never going to find your people, feeling like you're just a little bit out of step with most people around you. I mean, I can relate to that. If not to other parts of your story. I mean, there are other parts of your story that I just can't relate to at all. But that I know what that feels like a little bit. And I can tell you that, I mean, there are probably people out there that are your people, and hopefully you can continue to sort of find them as you go on. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you gotta be you, and you're still here, you're still going. You're still yourself. You're still growing and trying to, do better for yourself and lead a life that is meaningful and good. And I mean, that's not nothing, man. That's not nothing. And I appreciate you if nothing else. And I know a lot of other people do too. Next question is from Andrew C. Hawkins. I think we agree that people don't get to demand the deletion of or large-scale changes to Star Trek or Star Wars releases just because they sat on their butts and consumed them. However, something occurred to me that has implications for intellectual property. Is it just that gigantic capital entities, like Disney in the case of Star Wars and CBS Viacom in the case of Star Trek, should have control over such widely beloved stories? I feel like we could probably address this with some changes to copyright laws to make it easier for things to pass into the public domain. Because I'm a big fan of the idea of the public domain. I think it's completely fair for an artist or even a company, even a corporation, to control an exclusive copyright for something for a particular period of time. Like, I don't have any categorical objection to that, but the way the laws have been written and changed over the years, so that basically if an intellectual property is owned by a corporate entity, it essentially will never pass into the public domain. I mean, under current law, like, there are under current copyright law, it is feasible that at some point in the future, certain Star Trek, let's just use Star Trek as an example, certain works of Star Trek, certain episodes or stories will pass into the public domain, but the Star Trek intellectual property, the various trademarks associated with it, will not. They will always be owned by CBS, Viacom, or by some entity, unless they are just, unless they are placed in the public domain, which is never going to happen as long as they're a profit-making, property. That's never going to happen, and that doesn't strike me as particularly fair, especially when something becomes, a part of the culture. I mean, Star Trek, Star Wars, Superman, Batman, Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny. These are things that have been around for a very, very long time and are embedded in the fabric of our popular culture. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people do feel a certain sense of ownership of them. They are a part of who we are as a culture, for better and for worse. And it does seem a little unfair that particular corporate entities, even if they had a hand in creating them, are able to maintain exclusive control over them basically forever. I mean, if you want to say you can control them for a certain number of years or a certain number of decades, I mean, that seems completely reasonable to me. But it also seems reasonable to say after a certain amount of time, it's fair to say, and now it belongs to everybody. Now it becomes like the music of Mozart. Now it becomes like the music of Beethoven. Now it belongs to everybody. People, the copyright owners had their opportunity to sell it, to control it, to make money from it. That's fine. We live in a capitalist society. That's fine. But after a certain point, it passes into the public domain in a true meaningful way. I think that would be great. Yeah. So that's what I mean. I'm sort of in the middle there. I think it's fair for them to control it for a certain period of time. And I think it's especially fair for private individuals. If I as a particular artist create something and I'm stuck living in a capitalist society where I have to earn money in order to live, I think it's completely fair for me to be able to control my own creation for my lifetime. And then after that, or maybe a certain point after my lifetime, then it passes into public domain. But while I'm alive and I am, in the position where I can or must generate revenue from it to survive and to profit from my work, that I can control it exclusively, and then I can pass it on, or it can pass into the public domain after I'm gone. I have no problem with that. But eventually, I think it shouldn't be controlled like that for forever. Question from Zeraxis. So I had this idea while watching the end of your stream on Monday. It's regarding Superman. We'll give some quick background. So firstly, my primary experience with Superman is the DC animated universe version, mostly seen during the late 90s and early 2000s cartoon shows. This iteration, of the DC universe seems to imply that most of world history happened mostly the way ours did. By extension, presumably the slave trade, U.S. Civil War, World War I, World War II, and presumably most other significant world events happened the same or close to the same way as they did in reality, at least up until he entered the stage. Despite the fact that he's stated to be an immigrant success story, I find it interesting that he never seems to do much to create actual, lasting, genuine change within his universe. If anything, he seems to do everything he can to maintain the status quo as peacefully as possible. And I do think there's plenty of bits and pieces of evidence shown throughout the shows that life still is far from perfect for a lot of people, even with Superman around. There's also the issue of superheroes arguably attracting supervillains and making the world significantly less safe, but that's a bit of a separate issue. So, I guess my question is, do you think this makes him a potentially a barrier to progressive change? And if so, is this acceptable? Does a basically all-powerful, invulnerable person such as Superman have an obligation to enact positive change? Or is he allowed to speak for change, but ultimately do very little? And if so or not, then why? Sorry, that might be more than one question, but it's all part of the same general idea. Hope this wasn't too inconcise or silly. I don't mean to bash on a lot of people's favorite character. I just think it's an interesting topic to explore. Well, I mean, he is one of my favorite characters, and I didn't think it was bashing, so I hope other people would take it in that spirit. I think it's a great idea for a Superman story, actually. I think confronting that aspect of the character is a very rich vein that could be mined for story. It is that way for practical reasons. I mean, the main reason why Superman, at least in his comic book form, or in his sort of generalized, like sort of the like generic Superman, the reason why he doesn't enact more social change, I think, is because you want Superman to be operating in something that is roughly analogous to the real world. So he can't be that transformative of a figure, because then it becomes like an alternate reality story where the world that Superman lives in has been so profoundly changed by his presence that it is no longer a mirror of our own world, or at least it's not a direct reflection of our own world. And I mean, you can write stories like that. Like, there have been superhero stories that have been written from that perspective, where the presence of the superheroes radically alters the world. Watchmen is probably the best example of that, in ways big and small. You see how just the presence of Dr. Manhattan altered the course of history and changed society in tiny ways and in really, really big ways. And the creators of Superman have just chosen not to do that. They want Superman to continue to operate in a world that is, for the most part, like ours, and follows the same track of history as our world has. And in order for that to happen, yeah, Superman can't be that transformative of a figure. And it's not that realistic, and it doesn't speak all that well to Superman, since, as you say, it would require him to kind of just sit back and tolerate all of these problems that he could at least have a positive impact on, if not solve. I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say, well, Superman could fix everything, but he could certainly have a strong impact on things. And he just doesn't, because we need to keep the world that he lives in close to our own world so that the story plays better, or whatever. But I think that's a perfectly valid part of the character to explore. I think it would be great to have a story where someone confronts Superman with it. And there probably have been stories like that over the last 80 years, and I haven't read them, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but it's a great idea for a Superman story to have people confront him with this, to say, why aren't you doing more for people who are affected by police brutality? Why aren't you doing something more about the redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich? Like, why, instead of just punching Lex Luthor, why don't you try and do something to stop him strip mining the economy? You know what I mean? Like, there are valid points there to be made that are picking at things that are inherent to the premise of the character, but are still valid to point out. And would make a really interesting story, I think. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. It is an interesting topic to explore. And I don't think it's unfair to the character to point that out or to critique it for that. I think it's a really, really interesting, avenue to go down as far as the character. Because I agree with a lot of what you say. Neo-normie UPS man of the apocalypse. With Trump's sudden flip-flop on face masks and use of soapy language involving patriotism, and him not having the people skills to understand that he has worded it that anti-mask MAGA fools are anti-patriotic, will he get a massive amount of blowback, much like the rise in overseas payments to Israel lost him most of the alt-right? And what do you think of the Lincoln Project? Honestly, I think the people that are with Trump at this point are probably ride or die. Like, I don't know what else Trump could do to lose the people that he hasn't lost yet. I mean, maybe the mask thing will cause a few more people to jump off. But I mean, as I've said before in the past couple of months, ever since the COVID thing started, really kicked into full gear, and since Trump's own role in exacerbating it has become obvious, there are people, I see more Trump signs in people's yards and more Trump flags being flown by people, not fewer. So I feel like, and I don't think that means he's gaining support, because obviously the polls do not indicate that he's gaining support, but I think the supporters that he still has are becoming more galvanized and are becoming more determined to continue supporting him. So I don't think he's going to lose too many more people that he hasn't already lost. I hope I'm wrong. I'd like to see him continue to lose support, because I would like to continue to reassure myself that he's going to lose the election. But we're just going to have to wait and see. That's the sad part about that. That's the difficult truth about that, is I will not be reassured that he's going to lose the election until the election is over and he has lost, and that is not a guaranteed thing. And what do I think of the Lincoln Project? I really like their ads. I think their ads are really effective, and I read an interview in the Washington Post the other day with the founder, or one of the lead guys, and that was very encouraging. That he seemed, assuming we can take him at his word, he seemed to be committing to, not just having Trump lose the election and then turning around and going right back to being a conventional right-wing Republican. Like, it feels like he wants to not only get rid of Trump, but to hold the Republican Party accountable for all of the ways in which it has enabled Trump, and try to transform the party itself, not just get rid of Trump. And if that's true, and he actually does that, and the group actually does that, I think that's great. But, time will tell on that. But I'm encouraged by that, and I think the ads are really effective. So, I mean, right now, I don't have a problem with the Lincoln Project. Ahoyerno, are there any straight-to-VHS movies you like? It's one of those things that's used to deride a movie. I kind of like the Librarian movies. They're fun if you want more Indiana Jones without rewatching the same movies again. Disney also has a bunch of okay to great straight-to-DVD films like The Return of Jafar and Lion King 3. There are probably a few that I've seen that I like. For about the last, 10 years or so, I guess, maybe even longer. Warner Animation has been releasing direct to DVD and direct to Blu-ray, direct to video, I should say, to catch everything. Animated movies about the DC Comics characters, and some of them have been absolutely awful, but some of them I have really liked. I thought the first one they did way back whenever that was, which was their adaptation of The Death of Superman. I thought was really good, was very good. I mean, it cut the story down very harshly. Like, it took this months-long comic book saga and cut it down to like a 90-minute movie. But I thought it did a really good job with it. I thought it was excellent. And I thought the adaptation of Darwin Cook's New Frontier was excellent. That was really good. That was really good. And that's a great comic book, so that's like high praise for me. And what else? The Batman. The first Batman Superman, the Batman Superman Public Enemies, I thought was really good. As like just a fun sort of like an extended fight scene. It was very, very, very light, very sort of like a popcorn movie. It's basically just Superman and Batman just getting into fights with people. But I enjoyed it immensely. So I've enjoyed some of those. Some of those not so much. Some of them that I've seen I've thought were just really, really bad, or disappointing, or like adaptations of comic stories, and I thought they really, really failed compared to the comic. But some of them have been really good. So I'll say those. I'll say the better ones of the DC animated universe direct to DVD movies. Francois Lacombe, hi Steve. Do you have the impression that we're actually living in a simulation similar to SimCity, and whoever is running the program has decided to throw in a bunch of disasters just for shits and giggles, as one sometimes does when playing such games? Yeah, that's why I always turned off disasters. I wish whoever is running this simulation just go into the drop-down menu and just turn off disasters for a few years, please, just to give us a chance to build back up. That would be great. Thank you. Cassandra Brockett, I haven't asked a question previously because as much as I enjoy your content, I haven't felt a need to ask a specific question of you, until recently that is. I consider myself a moderate as I grew up in a country that understands more accurately the far left and far right than my current country of the USA. To that end, my question for you, Steve, is this. What are your feelings on the viewpoints of many in the far left in this country? By that I mean, do you feel some of the far left commentary is useful to cause meaningful change in the USA? I'm fairly convinced you've made clear your views on the far right, especially the alt-right. So I guess I'm really wondering what changes you think we can reasonably do as a society to effect true and lasting change for the benefit of all the peoples of the country. I feel like I largely agree with people who are further left than me on what the problems are. And I may even agree on what some of the solutions ought to be, but my problem is that I don't really see a lot of practical like road building to how do we get there. You know what I mean? Like when I hear people and read people criticize capitalism and how capitalism is inherently dehumanizing and debasing and encourages exploitation, and like that all sounds completely reasonable to me. Like I am not I'm not someone who's like, no, I must defend the honor of capitalism. Like I am. My feelings about capitalism are, oh no, it's a really shitty system. My feelings about capitalism are similar to what Ben Franklin is said to have said about democracy, that it is the worst of all possible systems. It is the worst system imaginable except for all the other ones. And I only say that because I am not convinced that the other systems, it's not that I think the other systems are worse than capitalism. It's just I don't necessarily know if in practice they would turn out to be any better. So it's not that I think like capitalism is, it's clearly the superior system. Like I'm not trying to defend capitalism at all. I'm just saying I remain unconvinced that the alternatives would necessarily be better. Maybe they would, and maybe I would even support moving to one of those systems, in the right circumstance. But I'm not convinced that it would automatically be better, despite my broad agreement on the absolute shittiness of capitalism and all the nasty, negative, awful things that come with it. So I as far as like how do we effect true and lasting change, that's why I stop short of being a revolutionary. I don't say, well, we need a revolution. I would much rather, and maybe we do. Like I say, I've said, like maybe I don't know. I'm innocent. I'm naive. I'm uninformed, which is my fault. That's not an excuse. That's my fault. But, maybe we do need a revolution. And maybe if we had a revolution and we completely overthrew the current system and rebuilt it from the ground up, maybe what we came up with to replace it would be better and would work better in practice and would be free of the kind of exploitation and inequality that we have now. Like maybe it would be a vast improvement. But I would rather focus my efforts, and I would rather see politicians and people with political and cultural power right now focus their efforts on changes to the current system that I think are easily achievable without a revolution and would vastly improve quality of life for people in our society. I feel like we can, if not totally fix things, we can at least greatly improve things with admittedly extensive reforms, but with reforms rather than revolution. And again, I know my friends who are anarchists and who are further left than me will disagree with that. And that's cool. We disagree on a lot of stuff, but we share the same goal of wanting to liberate people from economic inequality and wanting to see, an end to institutionalized racism and all of the other things that are brutalizing people and holding people back. Like we agree broadly on what the problems are and what needs to be addressed. We just disagree on how exactly to go about it and what is the most practical way of going about it. I'm more of a reformer, not a revolutionary. So I would tend to focus on stuff like that, a more equitable tax code, an expanded social safety net, universal health care, universal basic income, having things like basic necessities like food and water and a roof over your head and clothes and education and transportation, like things that people and access to communications, things like that, things that you need to be able to exist in modern society on anything like a level playing field. Like those are things that I feel like should just be birthright at this point. You shouldn't have to work for those. You shouldn't have to work and have to trade your labor for, the right to survive and live a meaningful life in this society. I feel like that's something that we should just give everybody as just the floor. And then you build up from that, instead of facing if I don't get a job, I won't be able to have a house. If I don't make enough money, I won't be able to buy food. I won't be able to eat. I won't be able to survive. Like that seems incredibly barbaric to me, and I don't think we should have that. So I feel like we can raise the floor to address a lot of that and to ameliorate, the effects of poverty on people's lives. And I think we should. And we can do that by passing laws and by changing policies and by, changing a lot of the systems that we have without necessarily tearing it all down and starting from scratch. But like I say, that's just me. But that's my thought on that. Lee Donovan says, "Hi, Steve. I was wondering how you rank the Star Trek themes, least to most favorite. My list is Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek TOS, Star Trek TNG, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Voyager, and my favorite, Star Trek Deep Space Nine." My list would be similar to yours. I would put Enterprise at the back. Let me see. I would put Picard behind TNG because I really like that TNG / Star Trek the Motion Picture theme. I would also, you left out, as I often have, and I don't want, you left out the Star Trek the Animated Series theme. I would put that in right between Enterprise and Discovery. So put that in there, and I don't know. I think I might put Discovery ahead of TOS. I really like Discovery's theme. I would put this. So mine would be Enterprise, Animated Series, TOS, Discovery. No, Picard, Discovery. I like the Discovery theme better than the Picard theme. Okay, so Enterprise, Animated, Picard, Discovery. No, wait. Okay. From least to most favorite: Enterprise, Animated Series, TOS, Picard, Discovery, TNG, DS9, and then Voyager. I think Voyager is my favorite theme, which will shock people because Voyager is my least favorite series. But the opening title theme to Voyager is absolutely gorgeous. So I would put Voyager ahead of the Deep Space Nine theme. So there you go. David Colby. So earlier today I tweeted about DC Comics, which means that the age-old enemy of us people with taste emerged, the random chuds who love to shit on Superman. Anyone else notice that their arguments are so fucking axiomatic? No one likes perfect Boy Scouts, they say, except, wait, where's their fucking spreadsheet on that? Like, I really love how moral and upstanding Superman is. I like that he's a Boy Scout who tries his best to do the right thing in even hard and trying circumstances. Also, where the flip did this idea get started that Superman is perfect and never has to struggle to overcome things? Like, have they never read a comic or seen the movies? Also, again, there's a huge contingent of the internet that absolutely adores the concept of himbos, which are agreed upon as being good-natured, incredibly strong men who are either kind of goofy or silly, or at the very least aren't as smart as their female buddies. And while Superman is clever, he's not nearly as sharp as his wife Lois, who is his wife, and they're married, and anyone who says otherwise can fight me. You have my back on this, right, Steve? Absolutely. Why can't these people just admit what the truth is? They don't like Superman because their souls are shriveled husks, and the place where childlike joy had once been has been replaced with an icy core of bitterness and envy. Also, I have a new book out. It's the long-awaited Star Trek Buffy the Vampire Slayer crossover. It has a reference to Wrath of Khan, the 2009 Star Trek film, the remnants from Nemesis, and Deep Space Nine, like Cisco, Tiffany Winters, Vampire Hunter, Punch's Q. Check it out. And the link to David's new book is in the description of the video, by the way, if anybody wants to check it out. And that sounds like a really cool story. Yeah, I mean, you're right. People who say, well, and I get especially annoyed at people who come at it from a writer's perspective. And they say like, well, it's hard to write a Superman story because he's so perfect. Oh, so you're admitting to being a shitty writer. Or it's hard to write Superman because he's so powerful. Oh, so you've just admitted to being a shitty writer. I mean, like, I would murder people to be able to write a Superman comic. Not anybody I cared about. I mean, maybe like I would murder some people who had it coming. If DC Comics gave me like a list of neo-Nazis and said, if you take these people out, we'll give you a monthly Superman comic, I'd be like, fuck yeah. I'm kidding, by the way. Anybody from the FBI is watching. It's just a joke. But no, and it, like, I've never, as a fan, as a writer, as someone who has dabbled in fanfic, like I've never, ever thought that either the character's goodness or the character's amount of superpowers that's never been a barrier to me in terms of stories, because that's not where, like, I don't connect with the character based on that. I mean, I see him as an individual and I admire his goodness and I admire his character. And then I think, oh, what are the conflicts I can introduce into a story to challenge this? What does Superman care about? Therefore, what can I come up with as a writer that would threaten him? Or challenge him. Like, that's what you do. That's what writing is, especially when you're writing a pre-established character, some character that you didn't create. You have a preset collection of traits and of things to deal with. And you think, okay, so here's Superman. Here's who he is. Where does the conflict come in? What does he want? What does he care about? What is he protecting? Who does he love? What's important to him? That's where story comes from, not if he has a whole bunch of character flaws, or he's an asshole, or he has a certain level of power. So it's like you can write people who can kick his ass, because I guess that's he needs to be able to get his ass kicked, or else you can't write a story about it. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I think he's a fantastic character. I do tend to like versions of him that are less powerful, but not because of, it makes him easier to write or makes him more relatable. It's just a preference I have, because other versions of the character that have had him as a less powerful just have appealed to me. But I mean, I would love to write like a Silver Age Superman where he was like incredibly powerful. I would love to write like a Christopher Reeve movie kind of Superman who was like super, super powerful. That would be a dream job for me. And never once would I ever think, oh gosh, how am I going to write a Superman story? He's just too good. Like, that's, you have confessed to your own lack of imagination, or your own shitty character. And as you say in your question, David, the fact that they have shriveled husks for souls. They have confessed to that. Next question from John Cranny. Hi, Steve. My wife and I love your videos, especially the Star Trek ones. Question, we're trying to pick a new Trek show to watch. So far, we've seen basically everything except Voyager, Enterprise, and Discovery. Just wondering which of those three shows would be your favorite to watch again for the first time. Well, I would say Discovery, because I think of the three shows you mentioned there, it's the best. And also, it's the fewest number of episodes. So if you watch it and it turns out you don't like it, you can either stop watching it and not feel like you're missing a whole bunch, or you can power through and watch all of it, and you're only watching, 28 episodes for the 2 seasons so far? 28 episodes so far. So it's not like you've had to spend, weeks binging through something that you didn't really enjoy. So I would say Discovery for both of those reasons. And also, I have not done a rewatch of Discovery at all. Like, I've watched particular scenes from Discovery over again for research for videos and stuff. But I have only watched season 1 and season 2 of Discovery straight through from beginning to end once. So, I mean, personally, that's the one I've seen Voyager and Enterprise a lot more. So if I was going to do a watch of any of them, I would do Discovery, because I haven't rewatched Discovery at all yet. But that doesn't apply to you or your wife. Mike says, so I asked a question last time about your view of the political leanings of a fiction versus how you perceive it based on your own leanings. And asking that question, I went to some pains to show that I was asking genuinely and not being a troll. That got me thinking. In this age of social media, trolls have become such a problem that it feels like no one is sure who is actually trying to have a conversation and who is just farting all over everything. So my question is, as someone who spends a great deal of time on the web and I assume on social media, how do you tell who's worth responding to and who is safe to ignore? I mean, I know if someone has a frog profile pic that it is a safe bet they are not worth the time, but I think it would be a mistake to never talk to anyone with a different political perspective. Where do you draw the line? Well, it's a tough question to answer because I feel like over the years, I've just kind of developed a sense for it. And I don't think my sense for it is 100% accurate. I'm sure there have been times where I have ignored someone assuming they are a troll when they weren't. And I know there have been times where I have sincerely engaged with a person thinking they weren't a troll, and then it turned out that they were. So it's not perfect, but if it happens enough time and you engage with people enough, or you read enough questions, and go through enough comments and stuff like that, you kind of develop a sense for it. You kind of can just sort of tell. And I don't know how to better articulate it than that. You can just, you learn to see certain signs. Leading questions that have incorrect or unflattering assumptions about you or about your views built into the question, questions that seem like they're loaded against you from the start. And sometimes that is very subtle. Most people, it's not always as obvious as, when did you stop beating your wife or something like that. The questions are loaded in a very insidious sort of way, but you can sort of learn to detect that or anticipate, well, if I say this, then they're going to say that, or if they're asking you something that you've been asked a whole bunch of times, and have answered in ways that people would know that you have answered that question already. Like there are ways you can tell, and it's not 100%, like I said, you'll always make mistakes and identify someone who is not a troll as a troll and vice versa, but you just kind of get a sense for it. And because I agree with you, you shouldn't get to the point where you just never ever talk to anyone who disagrees with you or who challenges you. That would be a terrible tragedy. But you just kind of, you figure out how to spot them. And you grow a thick skin so that if you do accidentally get into something with a troll, you can recognize it and go, oh shit, and you can just walk away right there. You go, fucked up, that's a troll. Fuck, I thought it was a good faith question, but it was a fucking troll. All right, fuck you. Block them, move on with your life, and you don't allow it to dominate your life or to ruin your day. Sean Hartley. Hi, Steve. I hope you and your wife are keeping well. I also would like to say that I hope all of your patrons and viewers are keeping well also. Well, thank you very much. I can't speak for all my viewers and patrons, but my wife and I are doing well, so thank you. My question is, do you wish we got an Equinox show instead of a Voyager show? The horrors that the Equinox crew put the nucleogenic life forms through were insane, and the horrors the crew went through themselves before having the idea to do such things to these life forms, the deaths of so many of the crew, and the skirmishes with other races they must have been through just to get themselves to the point where they meet Voyager. Personally, that is what Voyager should have been. I'm kind of sad we never revisited the remaining Equinox crew that were absorbed into Voyager's crew. Did they harbor any resentment toward the Voyager crew? Was there any disagreement in the lower decks? After all, they did mutiny against Ransom when he decided against killing more of the aliens. Definitely a missed opportunity. Do you have any thoughts around this? I'm all ears on your perspective. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that Voyager should have been as dark as an Equinox show would have been. Because yeah, you're right. Those people went through a lot of that. If there had been an entire series about the Equinox as we see it in Voyager instead of Voyager, that would be a really dark show. It would have also been I agree with you, it would have been a way more interesting show than we got with Voyager. But I don't think that Voyager necessarily had to be that dark of a show in order to be a good show. I think you could have done Voyager in a way that still acknowledged the reality of their situation, or presented their situation in a more realistic way or a more compelling way, where they had to deal with things like dwindling resources, hostile aliens, dissent among the crew, just the crushing depression and disappointment and hopelessness that would come from being that far from home and facing the probability that you were never going to make it back in your lifetime, or if you did, that you would have been traveling for 70 years in order to get there. I feel like it could have treated all of those things in a much more compelling way and used them to drive story much more, without necessarily becoming just a completely bleak show. Like, I feel like there's a middle ground between the Voyager we got and what we saw on Equinox. You know, I've never thought that, well, Voyager sucked because it wasn't dark enough, or Voyager sucked because it wasn't hopeless enough. But I would have liked to see the initial premise of the show used a lot more to drive story and to develop character. And I think you can do that without making it like a super dark, depressing show. John Brockman, so when are you going to buy a chain and truck that statue down to the river? Well, first of all, it's the creek that it's close by, not the river. And also, if I was going to do that, would I say it on a fucking live stream? Like, come on, John. Use your head, man. If I genuinely intended to ever do that, am I going to say it on a live stream? Use your head, man. Come on. Is this a trap? Are you trying? I mean, I almost said something. And I'm glad I didn't, because it's the kind of thing you can't take back. But no. Next question is from Jin Hai. Linear time. What is this? Well, wormhole alien, linear time is when you experience your existence one moment after the next, instead of seeing past, present, and future all at once, like beings such as yourself do. You experience it one moment at a time, and you don't know what's going to happen until it happens. And actually, there's a really good episode of Star Trek where Captain Sisko, or Commander Sisko at the time, explains this. And it's called The Emissary, and it's the first episode of Deep Space Nine. And I think I mentioned that because I'm pretty sure Sisko's explanation is a lot better than the one I just struggled to give. Bruce Bardup. Steve, Congressional Representative Cortez said that a decent man treats people with dignity and respect. What, in your view, constitutes a man decent enough to be president? Joe Biden may not pass. No, well, if the accusations against him by Tara Reid are true, then he does not pass. But I feel like unfortunately, we are beyond that, because he is the nominee. So I have no choice but to vote for him. You know, I've talked about this before. Yes, I mean, I think it's a bitter, terrible indictment of our system and of the way we treat, people who come forward as survivors of sexual assault, that we're willing to just completely brush it aside and say, yeah, but he's the nominee. I mean, I think that is a damning indictment of our society and of our political system. But here we are. And Biden's the only guy who is going to beat Trump, so he's the guy. So, I personally am going to shove all that down until after the election. But yeah, it's a good point. You're right. Joe Biden may not pass. You're absolutely right. But he will have to do, for the moment. He will have to do. Plasma Burn Death. Jolan True. Steve, I have an idea for a Star Trek show that would, I think, rock, and was wondering your thoughts about it. The premise would be simple: 4 or 5 separate ships, settings, and crews. The ships would be medical, exploration, science, cargo, engineering vessel, and light scout vessel, but telling the story in parallel. So during each hour episode, spending about 5 to 10 minutes on board each ship with each crew, telling short story arcs. To avoid confusing audiences, each ship would purposely have a unique color scheme with some sort of unique icon or badge, supplemental to Starfleet badge icon, since not all ships would have to be part of Starfleet to begin with. And Each segment could be in alphabetical order of ship names. So with this process, you have 5 to 10 minute episodes on TV. Each of these would be to be continued mini stories, which would add up to one normal episode for each crew from the crew perspective. I truly think having a varied to be continued arc like this would give everyone something to look forward to in the series. You could purposely give each crew something part of the fan base wants to see. Thanks for your time, Steve. Jolan True. It's an interesting idea. It might be confusing if you had that many stories going on at once. But then again, maybe not. There was a really, really great series on Showtime about 10 years ago now, I guess, called In Treatment, where the format was that there would be, depending on the season, either 4 or 5 episodes would air every week. It would be like Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday and it would be an episode every night. And the episodes were 30 minutes long, and each episode would be or each day of the week would be devoted to the therapist who was the star of the show, having a session with a different patient. And, patient 1 would be every Monday, patient 2 would be every Tuesday. So you had like 4 or 5 storylines running at the same time, plus, the doctor's storyline, which he always had something he was doing as well, independent of the patients, that sort of tied everything together. And it worked really, really well. And maybe a Star Trek show could do something like that, where there's a larger sort of overall story that ties everything together. But yeah, there are individual segments that just focus on particular ships or particular parts of the crew, and it all kind of, fits together in the end. Like that's an interesting idea. It's at least a new way to try and tell stories within the Star Trek franchise, which I'm all for. Like I would love to see them be a little bit more experimental in terms of how they tell their story. So something like you're describing might work, or something like I described, like analogous to In Treatment, where it's the episodes aren't released once per week. They're released every day, but it's much shorter episodes. Something like that. It could possibly be worth exploring. It's a really neat idea. Lynn Kibblemom, hi Steve, have you pulled your hair out yet? No, that's not my question. My question is, do you think we'll still have a functioning postal service when it's time to cast our absentee ballots for the November election? I ask because many of the numerous fundraising requests in my inbox every day relate to the dire circumstances in which the USPS finds itself in terms of funding, but I haven't heard it mentioned otherwise except by John Oliver. Several Democratic politicians have introduced legislation to provide additional funding for the Postal Service, but the Republicans will never let those pass. So what's to be done? I live in Washington State, where all voting is done by mail, so without the USPS, I can't vote. How concerned about this do you think I should be? Thanks for all your wonderful videos, Lynn. Concerned. I mean, Trump has made it clear that he is not a fan of the post office, and he is not a fan of voting by mail. So I think it would be foolish to assume that he would not try to stop people from voting by mail by trying to do something to sabotage the Postal Service between now and the election. Like, I feel like it's a legitimate concern. I think it's something that we need to make our representatives aware of, And if necessary, I mean, maybe privately funding, raising funds to deliver to particular post offices or particular regions of the post office is something that it will come to. I really don't know what we would do. But I mean, it is something we need to worry about for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I said, it's Trump has made no secret of the fact that he will make himself an enemy of the post office if necessary. I mean, he made that proposal earlier this year. Like, well, he said, I want the post office to quadruple its rates, which would essentially drive the post office out of business. They would price themselves out of competition with their private competitors. The only reason they still compete with organizations or with companies like FedEx and UPS now is because their prices are so much lower. If they quadrupled their prices to make them even more expensive than FedEx or UPS, they would be pricing themselves out of range of their own competitors. It would make no sense at all. But Trump was like, that's what they should do. So he clearly is trying to fuck up the post office. So yeah, of course it's something that we should all be worried about, especially people like who live in places where voting by mail is the norm. Absolutely. Vovacat17, Vladimir Kuznetsov, promised myself not to start questions with Russia news, but what the hell, this is my life now. So this is a hard question about when it is necessary for the people to go overthrow the government. So it's been about 15 days since the single biggest protest in modern Russia started in Khabarovsk. And I hope I pronounced that correctly, Khabarovsk. The protests are entirely peaceful, literally no property damage. These people love their city. They even asked the police to take away drunk guys, and well, police did. The government removed the governor of Khabarovsk. God, I apologize. I'm terrible with Khabarovsk, whatever it is. Sergei Fergal from his Post arrested him on some murder allegations from 15 years ago and took him to Moscow, despite that by Russian law he's supposed to be trialed by a jury in Khabarovsk. People assume it's because Khabarovsk's own jail is not willing to beat confessions out of people. Let's say nobody knew how much the city loved their elected governor. The peak number of people in the streets during protests reached 150,000 people. The population of Khabarovsk is 600,000, so it's literally 25% of all people there. And for the first 10 days, local police was just standing there watching and even helping out somewhat. I mean, they were that outnumbered, and then they were just the local guys, so probably most of them are with the protesters. When Moscow sent in an appointed temporary replacement for the governor, the slogans changed from "Give us Fergal back" to asking for the new guy to go out and have a talk and to calling for Putin's resignation. So now Moscow has allegedly sent out a huge armed guard force to Khabarovsk. They are still on their way. Besides, the new governor is barricaded in the office and doesn't talk to reporters. He also claims that the protests are provoked and organized by some foreigners who want to destroy Russia. So that made me think, we have never seen such a huge percentage of people go protesting in Russia. 25% of population is enough to start a civil war. Though the issue is not Black Lives Matter or something like that, it's just a governor who may or may not have been a criminal in the early 2000s. Every politician in Russia older than 40 has probably been a bandit at some point. The stereotype is that Russians hate all their officials, except for the Tsar, who is never to blame. But here we get the opposite. And I don't know if a governor removed from power is a good reason to start a civil war. The greater issue, Putin, however, is. So tell me, do you think that our age of democracies going authoritarian will soon turn into the age of new civil wars? Should people literally fight this if they are so pissed off that 25% of them literally go out on the street? I am a pacifist. I want no blood. But should we actually assume that this war may be the only remaining way to not become slaves? And there are many countries that want for their regime to fall. So should we unite the effort and then create the single largest democratic union that has ever been? This might just be crazy enough to work when regimes fall. It will not be perfect, just one step closer to it. So do you think the world civil war is actually coming? Or can we do it without blood with the sole power of the internet? Well, I don't think we can do it with the sole power of the internet, but I do think if enough people rise up and take to the streets and stop cooperating with the authorities. I mean, you said yourself, the cops in your town, until the Putin government sent people in, they were cooperating with the protesters and helping the protesters because, maybe they sympathized with them, and also they were just flat outnumbered. We do outnumber them. Like, it's the people outnumber the government. The people outnumber the military. The people outnumber the police. If enough of us go out, either in person or we make it clear, that we will not support the government anymore, like, I don't know if it has to come to violence. I think at that point, the government loses its mandate. And unless the government is run by people who are just dead set on violence, which is possible, but I think is not the case in many instances. I think it doesn't have to come to violence. I think the government loses its mandate, and they see that discretion is the better part of valor, and they abdicate. We've seen that happen before. A lot of the revolutions, or what we thought might be revolutions during the Arab Spring, there were outbreaks of violence, but for the most part, they were not armed revolutions. They were people by the hundreds of thousands taking to the streets and saying, hey, we're not going anywhere until this changes. So I think something like that could be effective. That, that would not demand an armed revolution. But I mean, I don't think we can do it just through the power of the internet. No, I don't think that. But do I think an armed civil war is absolutely necessary or inevitable? I don't think so. And I hope not. I hope not. But again, take what I say with a grain of salt. John Gingras says, "Hi, Steve. I've been furloughed from work now, so this might be my last Patreon question for a while, depending on how unemployment shakes out. As such, I wanted it to be a great question. However, I couldn't manage that, so this will have to do. Is Q a villain, or is he actually helping to guide humanity's development, or is he both?" Well, first of all, no hard feelings about if you can't be a patron anymore. I completely understand that, and I would just, if you do find yourself having to drop off, do what's best for you. I don't, hold that against you at all. I completely understand, and I hope that you do what's best for you. I hope you're okay. And thank you so much for the support that you've already given me. That's all I would say to that. In addition to wishing you the best. And I think Q is both. Like if we look at him for the entire arc of his character and take into account all of his appearances, clearly he is both. He started out pretty clearly as a villain. And I think the idea of Q being a secret friend to humanity, and specifically to Captain Picard, was sort of retconned in eventually. I think that wasn't in the character at the start, but it became part of the character as he continued to appear and obviously became a fan favorite. They kind of softened him a little, and then it became pretty obvious in All Good Things when he tells Picard that, "Hey, I was helping you." When he admits that he was responsible for jumping Picard backwards and forwards through the different time periods so he could figure out what the paradox was and save humanity. Like he admits that he was helping Picard and therefore he was helping humanity. So by the end, and I think that's mostly carried on through his appearances in Voyager as well. By the end, I think he is helping to guide humanity's development, and he is sort of an annoying, troublesome, kind of amoral friend, as opposed to a villain. Yeah, for sure. Joe McClory, I find myself desiring to watch a movie or read a story that is a slasher film where the unlikable victims of the monster are police officers, and the monster is either an undead victim of police violence or perhaps a spirit of vengeance called into being by the family of a victim of police violence that was unable to see justice. I also like this as a concept for a comic book anti-hero able to call forth the bodies of the unjustly killed to bring vengeance on their murderers, that uses their power primarily on the police and rich people who are able to avoid criminal justice. I'm honestly not sure if such a thing exists, and if it does, I would love to be recommended stories like this by you or the audience. What do you think? Would you like to see things like that? Do you think there is a tasteful way for someone who does not really have to fear being the victim of police violence to write such a story? Well, I think that last point is a good one. It might be better for people it might be better for people belonging to certain groups, people with certain experiences, to write those stories, as opposed to like someone like me who is probably never going to be a victim of police violence. That's a good point. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. I don't know of anything quite like that off the top of my head, so I can't recommend anything, but I think it's a great idea. And I can sort of see, like, if you do a horror movie where maybe the monster is like a victim of police violence come back to life to wreak vengeance, and the protagonist characters are cops. But then by the end of the movie, we have sort of learned enough to know, like we've gone through a journey where our perspective of the villain and the hero has turned so that they've kind of switched places. So by the end of the movie, we realize that the cop who we thought was the good guy actually kind of has it coming, and the monster who we thought was the villain actually isn't a monster at all, but is a wronged spirit that is coming back to exact justice, not commit acts of horror or violence for their own sake. That's a really, really compelling idea. Like, I really like that. I don't know of anything like that exists, but I'm 100% with you that I would love to see something like that. And finally, last question from Matthew Maeda. Hello, Steve. Had been thinking about this the past few days. What's your opinion on how they depicted Lore? I know in the early years of Next Gen, it seemed they were just throwing things at the wall and see what stick without going into much detail or thinking, but Lore pretty much was an evil Data. My thing was that there didn't seem to be a difference between the lore from Data lore and how he was after he stole the emotion chip during Brothers. Lore always seemed to have emotions. He enjoyed his evil acts. It wasn't as if he operated without having ethics and was cold, emotionless, or logical without ethics. He laughed, he smirked, he enjoyed firing a phaser at Dr. Crusher and watching her run away. Was he always supposed to have emotions and they just didn't explain it? Or they just didn't really grasp the detail at the start how to depict him? No, Lore always had emotions, and I think we were always supposed to recognize that he had emotions. The emotion chip that he stole from Dr. Sung that was meant for Data, that the significance of that wasn't that he stole it and therefore now he had emotions, because obviously he had emotions all along. It was that he stole something that had been made for Data. Like he stole, and not just emotions, but he, as he explained to Data later on, memories, like things that Dr. Sung wanted Data to have. And that's why Lore wanted it. He didn't want it because he wanted emotions. He already had emotions. He was jealous of Data. He felt like Data had wrongfully usurped him in the eyes of their father. And he was jealous of Data. He envied Data. So he took what Dr. Sung wanted to give Data. He said, Data doesn't deserve this. This should be mine. I should have Data's life. I should have Data's opportunities. You shouldn't have had to create Data. I should have been good enough for you. Therefore, I am taking this thing that you wanted to give to Data. It's mine now. Like that's the significance of Lore doing that, not the emotions. At least that's how I read it. Your mileage may vary. But anyway, that's it for the patron questions. Let's spend about half an hour or so with the live chat, shall we? Let's see how we're doing here. Let me see. I don't think we haven't had any super chats yet, so I don't have to catch up with any of those. So, Robert Mills, I just see Robert Mills saying Data was the favored son. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's why Lore hated him, and that's why Lore wanted revenge against him. 255 AD says, I think that explanation of how the holodeck works must have been canonized at some point because I already knew it, even though I have never consumed any extra canon material. That's interesting. I don't think it has. I mean, maybe if it has been, I just missed it. I never thought that it had been canonized. I remember it from that novel, but maybe it has been picked up by something else. I mean, obviously you got it from somewhere if you didn't read the novel, but that's interesting. I don't remember that. I remember it just from being with that novel. Mike Holden says, hey, Steve, what's your take on episodes like Past Tense and Far Beyond the Stars, their impact on the 90s and now, their impact on the 90s, C. Rodney King, and now BLM in the 2020s not being the far future anymore? Well, I mean, I don't know how much impact they had on the 90s because I don't know if the show was ever popular enough for them to have had like an impact. But I mean, I think their value is in giving us in the audience a lens to view those events. And I think, yeah, I mean, obviously they were relevant back then. They were relevant when they were first made. And unfortunately, they are still extremely relevant today because of, Freddie Gray and George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests and the Trump administration and all kinds of other things. They're extremely relevant because those are still issues, those issues of racism and inequality and economic inequality in past tense and racism and Far Beyond the Stars. They're still things that are the defining problems of our society. They were in the 90s and unfortunately they still are today. So yeah, those episodes are still extremely relevant. So Random Geek says, can we withdraw our right to consent to be governed by the federal government or any government that is a threat to our lives? Yes. And if enough of us withdraw that right, I think the government will have no choice but to recognize it. I mean, I feel like if you withdraw your right as an individual or a small group, it probably won't mean anything. But if enough of us say we no longer consent to be governed by this government, I feel like the government won't have a choice but to listen to you, Oh, and Vovacat17, just a clarification, Khabarovsk is not my hometown. It's pretty far. So thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying that. Marie Venema says, hey, Steve, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the BLM thing. I'm in the camp that language affects thoughts, and boxing people in as black is counterproductive. Anti-racism is good, can't type more. Well, but I mean, black folks are the targets of the crimes that are being protested. I mean, black people are, it's not about boxing people into a category. It's saying black people are targeted disproportionately by violent cops and by an unjust justice system. And we need to identify that problem if we're going to address it. We need to listen to black people who are, disproportionately affected by that so we can address the problem. So I don't think it's about boxing them in. It's about recognizing that their blackness is part of the basis for their oppression. And if you just ignore that, I think it's more difficult to respond effectively to try and, address and end that oppression. Some super chats from Twilord. Thank you, Twilord. Digimon for Smash Brothers. Any video game characters you'd love recognized in Smash? Elma from Xenoblade X, a woman of color, would be awesome. I'll take your word for that. I don't know anything about anything you just said. but I thank you very much for the super chat. Here's one from John Burns. Thank you, my friend. I'm not going to use my phone to post a question again. I tried it, but it just doesn't work. I'm posting this as a super chat so others will know. Not sure why it doesn't work. TGIF. Am I right? Yeah. Has anybody else had that issue? You can't post a question from your phone? Be aware, thanks to John's super chat, that may be a problem. And a super chat from Stephen Clinard that just says, thanks for being you, and a little sticker. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And Damon White points out, getting the emotion chip also gave Lore the ability to give Data the negative emotions. Yes, he transmits them to Data in the Descent episode, yes. Carlisle the Cinephile, when's your next patron hangout? This weekend, this Sunday, starting at noon Eastern. Yes, it will be this Sunday. 255 AD says, how do you feel about American atheists commenting on persecution going on in the Muslim world? The scathing guys do that sometimes, and it always feels uncomfortable. I don't have a problem with it as long as it is not... As long as it's not being done to deflect from problems in our world. I think my biggest problem with the way a lot of American atheists and Western atheists in general have talked about oppression in Muslim societies is it's become a way of saying, look at those guys over there. Isn't their society fucked up? It's a way of sort of denigrating and othering majority Muslim societies and basically saying like, well, look at the way they treat women. Look at the way they treat gay people. Aren't they terrible? And yes, it's terrible whenever anybody is oppressed and dehumanized, but we're guilty of many of the same things in our society, just to different degrees or in different ways. And it's, as I've said many times, it's very easy to point at some other people and saying, oh, look at all their problems over there. We need to make sure we're doing that to ourselves too. So that's my big problem with that. And yeah, I mean, if it's being done for that reason, if it's being done to say like, oh, boy, Saudi Arabia sure is fucked up. Like, yeah, it is. It certainly is. But so is the United States. We have to make sure that we're not using that over there as a deflection from the problems that we have. And a lot of atheists have done that over the years. A lot of atheists have done that. Super chat from Trick Simpson. Steve, do you take in much news from outside the USA? I get told to shut up as I'm not American, but I feel things happening in USA affects more than just USA. Oh, you're right about that. Yeah, I try to keep in touch or keep apprised of news from around the world to a point. I don't consume as much of it as I probably should, but I like to at least have some general notion what's going on outside the world. And yeah, you're totally right that what happens in the U.S. does affect the rest of the world. So people outside the U.S. definitely have a stake in news that's happening here for sure. Another super chat from John Burns. I was wondering if the U.S. could benefit from a non-two-party federal states electoral system. This is not the early 1800s where there are very few choices in the world. More parties, more voices. I agree with you. I would love to see the two-party system expand to a 3 or 4 or 5-party system. I would love for there to be more viable parties other than the Republicans and the Democrats. I've said that in videos before going back years. I think that would be a terrific thing. Another super chat from Twilord says, for the record, Smash Brothers is basically a playable Hall of Fame for video game characters. I think I kind of knew that, but I've obviously never played it. So yeah. But thank you again for the super chat. And thank you for the clarification. I'm pretty sure everybody in the chat already knew that, but thank you for explaining it for my benefit. Another super chat also from Philip Boylard. Have you seen Red All-Star Superman or Birthright? The former has a moment of Lex figuring out Superman, the latter written by Mark Waid, who's great. Yes, I have read them both, and I love them both. Especially All-Star Superman, I think is one of the great Superman comics, one of the great superhero comics ever written. And that moment when Lex sees the world the way Superman sees it is amazing. It's a really, really great moment. Yeah, and it's a great... yeah. I mean, Birthright is good too. Like Birthright is really, really good. I really liked it. And who did the art for that? Who did the art for Birthright? Was it Gene Yu? I can't remember. But the art for Birthright is gorgeous as well. But All-Star Superman is amazing. Let me see what some of the people in the chat have been saying while I have been missing them. Oh, hi, Dana. Dana's here. Way back in the 90s, way to make me feel old. Well, we're basically the same age. So, which I think we've talked about that. We've talked about that before. It's like it's one of my favorite punchlines when you say something about something that happened a while ago. And it's like, remember, can you believe it was that long ago? We're so old. Like, we're basically the same age. So, take solace in that. If I make you feel old, I'm making myself feel old too. Another super chat from John Burns. Is it true that regardless of race, people are better off getting a diploma, as having a diploma can put you in a very good position for a college, maybe not the college? I'm not sure what all the statistics are, but I think it's true that you do better with a diploma than without a diploma. I'm not aware of any particular racial category where people don't do better with a high school education than without it, but I could be wrong on that. I'm not sure. Braden Goss says, Star Trek The Next Conversation podcast gave you a shout out on the latest episode. That's cool. I had no idea. That's good to know. Daryl Letts says, quick question. Which do you think is better, or the lesser of two, or the evil of two lessers, capitalism or feudalism? I think capitalism is better than feudalism. But obviously, I don't think either. As I said earlier, and as I'll reiterate now, I don't think either system is necessarily worth defending. It's just a question of which is the least shitty system. Isaiah Taylor says Elle Woods for president, Cher Horowitz for VP, and Catherine Murtoil for Secretary of Defense. Or Murtoil for Secretary of Defense. Chris H says, do you think technological advancement will lead us out of our troubles like it did with Trek, hopefully without World War III? Well, it'll take more than just technological advancement. We'll have to know what to do with it. I don't think technological advancement by itself will be our salvation. Harry Garrison says, back to my Nick question from the pre-show. Do you think Nickelodeon will let Kurtzman put LGBT characters in Prodigy? I think if Kurtzman pushes for it, they will. I think it's kind of on him. I mean, I hope he does. Like, I hope he is serious about wanting more representation. And and if he wants to put an LGBTQ character in Prodigy, I hope that he pushes for it. I think Nickelodeon, if he says, do you want a Star Trek show or don't you? I mean, I feel like they'll probably let him do it. And I hope he does. CeeLo626, have you heard the cut song Congratulations from Hamilton? It's so good, but I think they had to cut it because Angelica murders Alexander with it, and he needed to live a bit longer. I have not heard that one. No, I've heard a couple of the deleted songs, but I have not heard Congratulations. A Trance says, will you ever do a video on the Jem'Hadar, like at times how they show compassion and empathy? Maybe. I mean, I don't have any ideas for the Jem'Hadar right now. And that, I mean, that's a possibility, but I would need to come up with more of an angle on it than that. But yeah, it's possible. Yeah. Joe McClory, did you watch any Michael Brooks? I've been quite sad about his passing, but thought the cop slasher film was a bit more interesting. Question. I watched the occasional clip from him, but I was not like a regular viewer of his stuff. But obviously, I mean, his death is shocking and is being very deeply felt by a lot of people. So, I mean, I feel very strongly for that, but I was not personally like a huge fan. And I see further down, Dana points out a diploma does not erase the racial wealth gap a white high school dropout earns similarly to a black college student. I'm not surprised by that, but a black high school graduate does better than a black high school dropout. That's kind of the point I was making. It doesn't, not that the high school diploma erases the wealth gap, but in every category, having a diploma is better than not having one, right? And again, I don't know. I can't say I know that for a fact, but I'm not specifically aware of any instance where it actually isn't better to have a high school diploma. Yeah, I am old. I am old. We are both old. We're both old. Oh, it was Gene Yu for as the artist for Birthright. I thought so. It's been a while since I read it. Moonbeam87 asks, are you going to take part in Life in a Day? Probably not. Vovacat17 says, read my last one, please. Alrighty. Let me find it. Fovacat17 says, funny thing is, I really want to live in a civilized country like Canada, but let's say US. But I really love how beautiful it is here, so I kind of want the US to be here. That would be, yeah, you know, or at least, or maybe a better country than the US there. Right? I'd like to live in a civilized country like Canada someday too. Yeah, I thought so about the diploma being better than no diploma. I thought so. I mean, and I'll take Dana's word for it because she probably knows better than I do about like everything, but especially about this. Cam the Don says, Doctor Who is the greatest franchise ever created. I mean, I'm not going to like wrestle you over it. I would, I would prefer, I would say Star Trek, but I'm not going to fight you over it. Daryl says, I was just going to ask Steve if at age 40 he feels old yet. It depends. It depends, right? There are times when there are times when I feel like I'm still 20 years old. And there are times when I feel like I'm older than I am. It depends. You know, emotionally, in many ways, I still feel very young. But in other ways, there are times when I am made aware of how much time has passed, and it takes my breath out of my body. I'm like, holy shit, it's been a long time. God, I'm so old. It depends. It depends. But for the sake of telling jokes and being funny, yeah, I feel incredibly old. John Burns Super Chat says, I like President Garth Brooks and VP K.D. Lang. Okay, cool. I'll still go with Deadman and Springsteen, but, you know, to each their own. And by the way, I'm really skipping around the live chat here. So if I miss your question, it's nothing personal. What is so funny about when I was 20, Dana? You were, okay, first of all, you were there. Maybe that's what you're laughing at. You remember. You were there and you're like, holy shit, that was hilarious. So, you know. No, Radical Bacon, I turned 40 this year. I'm technically 40 now. I appreciate you going to bat for me and saying I'm 39, but I turned 40 in May, so I am officially 40. but I appreciate you attempting to hold me back for my 40s. Um, Joe McClory asks, is there any more science-based sci-fi you're into? The Expanse or The Martian? Or The Martian, for example? Or do you like your science as magic better? You know, I was just thinking about this the other day. Other than like Star Trek and Star Wars and like pop sci-fi, stuff like that, I've never been really super into like hard sci-fi or sci-fi in general. I'm not sure why that is, but I mean there are like, you know, I love the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I've never read the book or the story. I've never really read any Arthur C. Clarke. I've read a little bit of Ray Bradbury here and there, and even that is like pretty mainstream. That's not, you know what I mean? So no, I'm not really like super into sci-fi as a genre beyond, you know, the stuff that I usually talk about. Super chat from Trick Simpson. Thank you once again. I'm 39 in October, and no, NASA, I am still a Libra, so shut the hell up. I also want to point out, Dana says engage, which is an inside joke between the two of us, and it is not the reference you are thinking. I'll just say that it is not the reference you are thinking of. People who are not in on the joke, but it's pretty funny. And Vovacat17 says, the thing is, the Russian government is going to fight over this power, probably going as far as nuclear threats. Russian civil war was bloodier than U.S. civil war with public torture. Yeah, I mean, maybe I guess that's one of the reasons why you would want to move to another country, because it'd probably be easier than having to, you know, create a better country there, given that circumstance. Did I miss your super chat, Twilord? Let me go back and see. I did. I apologize. Capitalism or feudalism? Be like the UK, oligarchic feudalism, posing as socio-capitalism, openly posing traditional feudalism. Yeah, that we could do that. Yeah, Moonbeam 87. I was born in 1980, and someone else asked the birth date. My birthday is May 5th. So please don't steal my identity. Serenum Geek says, how about no president? Why let someone have that much power? Well, I mean, the idea is the idea is the president isn't supposed to have that much power. There are supposed to be checks and balances. There are supposed to be, the president has a certain amount of power, but the president's power is limited by other powers that the judicial branch and the legislative branch have, and their powers are in turn checked by the executive branch and the other branch. Like the idea isn't that the president has unlimited power. The president is supposed to have enough power to be able to be an effective executive in charge of the federal government, but not, you know, to have enough power to be a dictator. That's the idea. Radical Bacon asks, what would you stream on Twitch? You see, I have no idea. That's one of the reasons why I've never done it. Like, well, you know, it's funny. Like I see the few people's shows that I've watched on Twitch a little bit. I mean, it's just not the, I mean, I'm not saying that I couldn't do it or I would be bad at it, but it's just not the kind of thing that I usually do. Like even something like this, which is fairly freewheeling and unstructured, you know, like I do it once every 2 weeks for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then it's over. And a lot of the shows I see on Twitch are like really open-ended, and they just go for hours and hours. And sometimes it's like an everyday thing where they're just streaming, and it's really, you know, there's not really a format, or if there is a format, like it's really, really sort of generalized. And it's like, well, we'll, you know, hang out with the chat for a couple hours. We'll watch some videos together. Maybe I'll have someone come on with me, and we'll hang out or talk, or we'll be on each other's streams or whatever. Like it just feels really, really sort of unstructured. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it's not usually how I go, So I don't know what I would stream on Twitch, and I don't game. That's another. Most people use Twitch to do game streams, and I don't play video games. I've toyed with the idea of maybe doing like a live stream where I'm playing like an old Star Trek game. I have Star Trek 25th anniversary and Star Trek Judgement rights on this computer that I'm on now, and I've thought maybe it would be fun to do like a gaming stream where I'm playing one of those. But I mean, that wouldn't be like a regular thing. It would just be, something to do. So I don't know what I would do on Twitch. I think that's why I'm not on Twitch. Funk Yeah says Steve's birthday is just days after Free Comic Book Day. That's got to make gift shopping easier. Actually, you know what? I make gift shopping even easier than that. Because every time anyone asks me, what do I want for my birthday? I always say nothing. And I mean it. It's not that I'm mad. Like if somebody gets me something anyway, I'm not mad at them. But I sincerely mean it. Whenever anybody says, what do you want for your birthday? And I say, oh, you don't have to get me anything. I'm not just saying that. I really mean it. Like you don't have to get me anything. John Burns, Super Chat, thank you once again, says, under COVID, the biggest mass shooting in North America happened in Nova Scotia, which makes things better in 2020? Any idea why? People focused on family and not travel? Yeah, I guess. I mean, just the lockdown in general, fewer public spaces open with crowds, I guess, would be the explanation for that. It's certainly one of the unforeseen, I guess, kind of sort of benefits of the outbreak. It's not, I mean, I still wouldn't recommend it. And here's another super chat from Mojo Dan 5520ZE. Hey Steve, any chance of a next gen Ensign's log with a descendant and an older Barkley? We are going to do next gen for Ensign's log, but that will not be the format. But the Ensign's log is going to continue into next gen. That's 100% certainty. I saw a question up here from Dana who says, who is your favorite female comic book character and why? I would have to say probably Catwoman, and specifically Catwoman as written and drawn by Darwin Cook. I loved Darwin Cook's Catwoman run. He did Catwoman backups in the Batman comics back a long time ago. And then he did the Catwoman ongoing series for a little while, and he did one of my favorite Catwoman stories ever called Selina's Big Score. And I love that she is, I love the sort of modern take on Catwoman where she is not quite a hero, but she's not a villain either. She does have a certain amount of self-interest, but at the same time, she also has some ethics and a concern for other people. And she does have a sense of justice that puts her at odds with Batman a lot of the time, but doesn't make her like an out and out villain, doesn't make her as bad as other Batman villains. She's not like, a sociopath or a remorseless, whatever. But yeah, I think Catwoman in general, and specifically the Darwin Cook version of Catwoman from about 15 or 20 years ago. I think she's my favorite. And then I saw, Vovacat said, how about you make the weekend Patreon hangout 30 minutes longer just as an experiment? A month is a long time and an hour is not. I know, but the thing is, the weekend, the Patreon hangout often takes place on days when I have other stuff to do. Like on Sunday. Sunday is also the day when Jason and I record our new podcast episodes. And I like to be able to do the Patreon hangout and then have at least a little bit of time to do other things before I jump right into the podcast recording session, which is usually like a 4 or 5 hour thing. And it's not like grueling at all. Like I love every second of it, but that's a big chunk of my day. So it's a scheduling thing more often than not. It's not that I wouldn't want to spend time with you all, more often or spend more time, but it's just, it's having the time in the day to do it. Another super chat from John Burns. People also stream and make musical CDs and draw and paint. Perhaps you could do a stream of behind the scenes Stephen Stuffy, or write a Star Trek novel, or sing in Klingon, or comic book page. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I could also do that stuff on YouTube, you know. Super chat from Stephen Mulvey. Thank you very much. Says, hi, Steve. Do you think it's possible for an afterlife to exist as a natural part of the human cycle without having God as a requirement? I find trying to believe in a God annoying at times, but I desperately want there to be an afterlife. Well, I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't see any evidence for it, so I don't believe it. But is it possible? Sure. And it's probably more likely that that is the case than that there is some kind of supernatural being that is responsible for it. You know, if there is some kind of existence beyond what we think of as life, if our existence does continue after our physical death, it's much more likely that it is part of some yet undiscovered natural process than it is, you know, a supernatural being involved in it. So yeah, I just don't see any evidence that that is the case. I would love for there to be, like, I would love to be able to believe that. I just see no evidence for it. And then earlier, up a little while ago, Dana also asked, when are you going to write the story where Harley kills the Joker? Didn't we write that? Or did we just sort of come up with ideas for it? I feel like that was one of the ideas. I know we talked about it last year, didn't we? Maybe we didn't. I guess we never actually wrote it. I guess I should get on that. I've been wanting to do it. I've been wanting to write another fanfic recently. Maybe that's the one I should look at. I also remember I had the idea. I was talking to you last year about it, or no, was it earlier this year? I can't remember. It's been a while ago. About the I think it was last year, because this year has been all fucking COVID-19 stuff. It was last year because it was when the big story was the detention of immigrants at the border, and I wanted to write a fanfic about Batman and Superman, and have it to do with the unlawful detention of immigrants, and we talked about that a little bit. I remember. I never wrote that either, but I would like to write a fanfic, another fanfic. Maybe the Harley kills Joker one is what I should do. 255 AD, please answer your Joe Biden question. Let me go back and find it. Should the left start pushing for Biden to be impeached after the election? Should we care that the right would call us cynical political actors if we do that? No. If you want to push for Biden to be impeached, I think you should wait until after the election. I think defeating Trump is the whole reason why I want people to vote for Biden in the first place. I mean, I don't think that Biden, just based purely on his policies, I don't think Biden would be a terrible president. I don't think he would be as good as I would like him to be, but I don't think he would be terrible. It's just, his character and the Tara Reade accusations that really trouble me. I mean, in terms of how good of a president he would be in terms of policy, I'm not nearly as bothered by that as a lot of people further to the left of me. I mean, I wish he was a hell of a lot more progressive than he is, but I don't think he would be like a total disaster. But if you think he deserves to be impeached or would deserve to be impeached, I think you should wait until after the election before you start pushing it. Because I would like for him to win the election. And then if he gets impeached, his vice president can take over, and okay, great, fine, no harm done. But yeah, I would not encourage people to push for him to be impeached before he is even A, elected, and B, inaugurated. That's the other thing. Yeah. And also, like, unless he is found to have committed some really, really heinous crime, he's not going to be impeached anyway. Like, he's not going to be impeached. And Vovacat 17 brings up an interesting question too. Can you even impeach people for something they've done while they were not president? I don't know. I mean, I guess, the Constitution is vague enough. Maybe you probably could, if the Congress deemed that it was relevant or that the crime was bad enough to disqualify them from being president. I suppose the impeachment statute in the Constitution is vague enough that maybe you could. But yeah. John Burns says, still waiting for the Star Trek comic where Picard says to Will, and of course we named the dog number 1. Oh, hi, Will. Didn't see you there. So anyway, yeah. Some random geek, and then also Dana seconds it for reading fanfic. I could do that. I already read, I read the Picard fanfic. And that seemed fairly well received. You know, Stargazer, my version of the death of Captain Picard. I read that in a video, and that was fairly well received. So I guess I could read a fanfic on a stream. But I would do it on YouTube. I wouldn't do it on Twitch. But yeah, I could do that. Maybe I'll do that sometime. Oh, before we close. Okay, I totally forgot about this. So this is a fun thing. I wanted to share this with everybody. I discovered this earlier. I was talking with my wife, and first I don't remember what prompted it, but I was talking about the song "On Top of Old Smoky." Remember the song "On Top of Old Smoky"? And my wife immediately countered with the kids' summer camp version, "On Top of Spaghetti," right? On top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese, I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed, right? And I said, well, that's not how that song goes, right? And then she says, well, how does it really go? So I said, I said, oh, it's, on top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow, I lost my true lover for something. And I couldn't remember it. I looked up the lyrics to On Top of Old Smoky. Dude, that is some dark shit. So I'm going to read you the lyrics of On Top of Old Smoky, purely for purposes of critical analysis. So this is fair use. And just for those of you who don't know the song, because I didn't know the song. I knew the song, but I didn't know all the lyrics. So for those of you who, like me, didn't know all the lyrics to On Top of Old Smoky. Oh, by the way, there's a super chat from John Burns. Who says, Patrick Stewart mentioned writing his memoirs. Am I the only one who wants to hear Brent Spiner's Audible.com version? No, you are not. That would be amazing. Back to On Top of Old Smoky. So here's how On Top of Old Smoky goes, okay? And I was not prepared for how dark this song is. On top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow, I lost my true lover for courting too slow. That's the part that I couldn't remember. And it goes on from there. For courting's a pleasure and parting's a grief, and a false-hearted lover is worse than a thief. Okay. A little heartbroken, understandable. For a thief will just rob you and take all you save, but a false-hearted lover will lead you to the grave. Okay, it's getting a little darker, We're talking about the grave now. So, but it goes on. It goes on from that. And the grave will decay you and turn you to dust. Not one girl in 100 a poor boy can trust. Little cynical, right? Little misogynist, I think. Not one girl in 100. Okay, he was having a bad day. He was getting out of a bad relationship, I guess. It goes on, though. They'll hug you and kiss you and tell you more lies than cross lines on a railroad or stars in the skies. Okay. Now, here's his closing, okay? So come, all your maidens, and listen to me. Never place your affections on a green willow tree, for the leaves they will wither, and the roots they will die. You'll all be forsaken, and never know why. Some random geek, is this an incel song? That's exactly what my wife said. She said, I knew as soon as you got to the part about how I lost my true lover for courting too slow, I knew it was going to turn out to be an incel lullaby. I had no idea this song was so fucking bleak. And it's not just an incel song. It's super, super negative toward women. At a level that I was not prepared for. But Dataport does. I didn't know the quartering was born in 1846. Yeah, Dana, My Darling Clementine is super dark too. I am familiar with that one, but I did not know that On Top of Old Smoky was so dark. Super chat from John Burns says, reminds me of the song Found a Peanut. Dark, yeah. Yeah, I had no idea that it was so bleak. Because it's not just like, oh, women suck, right? It goes to like, it takes you to the grave. And it says they'll put you in your, it's not just, oh, they'll turn their back on you. They'll tell you lies. It'll all end up in tears. It's no. They'll put you in your fucking grave. It's so dark. And I didn't know this. According to Google, I'm going to have to look this up to confirm this. According to Google, the credited songwriter is Pete Seeger. Now that can't possibly be true because it's way older than that. I think it's just a traditional song. Maybe I guess Google is crediting it to Pete Seeger because he recorded a popular version of it. But Pete Seeger did not actually write the song. I think he probably, he like maybe compiled a version of it from pre-existing versions, and his version became kind of the canonical version. But I don't think Pete actually wrote the song. Most of Pete's stuff is not nearly that dark or that incredibly sexist. But yeah, so there, who fucking knew that On Top of Old Smoky, this like campfire song that we've now I know why they rewrote it with spaghetti lyrics. You can't have kids sing that fucking song. Yeah, so anyway, Vovacat17 says, I hate the word incel because I technically qualify and really feel unattractive and not willing to do anything with it, but I don't blame women for it. Damn, incel is offensive. Yeah, you're right about all of that. You're right about all of that. Azalea Jane says, I like to listen to your Atheist Read series while I work. They're very comforting. Well, thank you. I'm glad that people are still getting enjoyment out of those. Yes, Zeraxis, developed by incels, codified by Pete. Thanks, Pete. By the way, I was thinking of a Pete Seeger song the other day. I was thinking of Talking Union, which is a song that he wrote when he was a member of the Weavers, I think, which is one of the most awesome songs ever. If you've never heard Pete Seeger or the Weavers, I think it was when he was with the Weavers. If you've never heard the song Talking Union, look that up. Still relevant today. Especially relevant today, especially if you're talking about teachers' unions, because they're the ones that are really getting fucked by people trying to reopen schools. Yeah. That's my Pete Seeger recommendation. Talking Union. Was Pete Seeger related to Bob Seeger? Not that I know of. Dana says, well, when incels don't get any of their dicks start to wither, and it spreads until they crumble into dust like staked vampires. If only that were the case. Sadly, that does not seem to be the case. Yeah, and also, yes, Dana points out to Vovacat, if you're not misogynistic, you're not really an incel. Exactly. Trina Conrad says, love the latest episode of the Ensign's Log. Thank you. I love that one too. That was a lot of fun to record. As often happens, I didn't know it was going to go that direction until it started to go that direction. Like Jason and I, we usually talk about what we want to accomplish in the episode, but sometimes sometimes it's just as general as Jason saying, okay, I'm going to leave after such and such, and then you're going to talk to so-and-so, but we never talk about exactly where it's going to go. So it's almost entirely improv. And I really, yeah, the new episode that went up today is really good, is really fun. So I'm glad you liked it. Porpoise Power says, my favorite Pete Seeger song is the Goofin' Off Suite. If you've seen Raised in Arizona, you know it. Pete Seeger had so many amazing songs. I used to have, I think I still have it somewhere. I had like a couple of DVDs of just like Pete Seeger's greatest hits, and Jesus, I could listen to that all day. John Burns says, about reopening schools, parents aren't forced to send their kids to school, right? No, they're not. But yeah, but if schools do reopen, a lot of parents will send their kids to school, and a lot of teachers will return to work. And as a result, COVID-19 will spread a lot further, and a lot more people will get sick and die. So, I mean, yeah, it is. I mean, parents don't have to send their kids, but the fact is a lot of parents will. What songs do you recommend, or where should I start with Tombstone to Dead Man? I would recommend his album, The Sixth Extinction, because that is my personal favorite, and that is the one that I still, I mean, he's done more than that. That's the one that I still listen to this day. The Sixth Extinction by Tombstone to Deadman is where I would recommend you start, because that album is fucking awesome. And then if you like that, sort of work your way back and forth from there. But I would recommend starting with The Sixth Extinction. 255 AD says, no, I meant after the election. Like, how will the right react if we say Trump is out, now let's try to impeach Biden like 5 minutes after the inauguration? I mean, if you try to impeach him 5 minutes after the inauguration, that might not be the best. You know, like, I don't know if impeaching him, like, if you're saying, like, let's impeach him for the Tara Reade allegations, I suppose maybe the Republicans could say, oh, it's hypocritical. But then, I mean, Democrats could just turn around and say, well, you know, we would have impeached Trump for that shit too if we thought we would have gotten anywhere with it. I mean, I feel like that's not necessarily, you know, yeah. I don't know, something like that. Dana says employers effectively are forcing parents to send kids as is the government by cutting unemployment. Well, yeah, exactly. Like you have a choice legally, but practically you don't have a choice. Like working parents who don't have any other place to put their kids during the day when they go to work. Yeah, that's one of the things that's so shitty about it. Is that, yeah, like they are kind of forced to send their kids to school, even if it's not by law, it's just by circumstance. Circumstance that should not be. Circumstance that it could very easily be different and should be different, but isn't. All right. So I'm going to wrap up because we've been going for, let me see. We have been going for almost 2.5 hours, which I think might be a record. So I'm going to wrap this up for the night. Thank you all so goddamn much for being with me for this. This is one of the highlights of my month. I love doing these. I love doing these streams. I love talking with you and answering your questions and hanging out with you. So thank you all so much for the support. Thank you all so much for the questions. I want to remind you that if you enjoy what I do on this channel, you can support this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon at patreon.com/Steve Shives. And a donation of any amount qualifies you to submit questions ahead of time for this show, for Ask Away. The Monday before every Ask Away stream, I post a separate post on my Patreon feed that is a call for questions, and you just leave your questions and comments to that post and I'll answer them on the show. And that's just something I do to show my appreciation for my patrons and to give me something to do for a live stream. And also, as we mentioned a couple minutes ago, I co-host a couple of podcasts along with the great, brilliant Jason Harding. They are Late Seating, the movie review podcast, where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve whatever their reputation is, be it good or bad. Our most recent episode of that went up last week, and it's our review of the classic Ingmar Bergman film, The Seventh Seal. And we also co-host the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek-themed improv comedy podcast, which had a new episode go up just today. So check out the Let Me Listen podcast. You can listen at the website, letmelistenpodcasts.com, or on SoundCloud, or various other links are in the description. Also, don't forget the charity links that our pal Some Random Geek has been kind enough to compile for us to help out some of our friends who need a helping hand. You can just go click on the link in the description and check out a Google Doc with links to fundraisers for a bunch of our friends who need help. Thank you in advance for that. Super chat from John Burns saying, but you didn't answer my 15th question. Sorry. I'm sorry for missing your 15th question, John. Thank you for the super chat. And Random Geek is pitching it in the live chat. So don't forget Social Justice Alchemy as well, which is on the Social Justice Alchemy channel. Starting at 7 p.m. UTC, 2 p.m. Eastern Time each Saturday with Some Random Geek and John Brockman and Tom McDonald, Phoenix, Mehmet, and Leto Anor. Awesome people, every single one of them. Check out that show if you have the chance. And also don't forget the Black Lives Matter fundraiser, which is still linked in the description as well. So that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much. Don't forget for people who are patrons or people who just like watching me hang out with my patrons, my monthly patron hangout is this Sunday starting at noon Eastern. So I'll see you again for that. And I'll see you in about a week and a half, I guess, for another Facepalm 5. And I'll see you in 2 weeks for another one of these. And in between that, a whole bunch of times for pre-recorded, edited videos. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you later. Thanks for watching, everybody.